The October morning air in Marietta, Georgia carried the scent of burning leaves and pumpkin spice from the coffee shop down the street. Sarah Martinez wiped flour from her hands onto her apron, stepping back to admire the three-tier vanilla cake cooling on her kitchen counter. The delicate pink and gold buttercream roses she'd spent 2 hours piping looked like something from a magazine, which was exactly what she'd been going for. Perfect, she whispered to herself, photographing the cake from multiple angles. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Eleanor. Can't wait to see everything tomorrow. You're gonna make Jake cry happy tears. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. And tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with anticipation. 28 weeks pregnant, she could finally feel their daughter moving regularly. Little kicks that made her pause whatever she was doing to place her hand on her rounded belly. After 2 miscarriages in the past 3 years, she and Jake had decided to wait until the second trimester to celebrate publicly. This baby shower wasn't just a party, it was their declaration of hope. The suburban ranch house they'd bought last spring still felt too big sometimes, but Sarah had spent weeks envisioning how perfect the living room would look, filled with friends and family. She'd ordered custom pink and gold balloons, found vintage baby bottles at antique shops around Atlanta, and even convinced Jake's traditionally stoic mother to fly in from Phoenix. "Babe, you in there?" Jake's voice called from the garage door. She heard him wrestling with what sounded like folding chairs. "Kitchen," she called back, carefully moving the cake to the refrigerator. "How did pickup go?" Jake appeared in the doorway, his dark hair slightly mussed, wearing his weekend uniform of jeans and a Georgia Tech t-shirt. At 31, he still had the lean build of the college soccer player he'd once been, though Sarah noticed he'd been carrying tension in his shoulders lately, the kind that came from the pressure of his promotion to senior project manager at the construction firm. "Got everything," he said, but his smile seemed forced. 40 chairs, 6 tables, and enough tablecloths to cover a football field. Your sister wasn't kidding about the guest list. Sarah laughed, moving to help him with the boxes he'd set down. 63 people confirmed. "I know it's a lot, but Jake, everyone's so excited to celebrate with us after everything we've been through." She trailed off as she noticed Jake staring at the cake through the glass refrigerator door. His expression was unreadable, not the joy she'd expected, but something closer to fear. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. "Really beautiful, Sarah. Are you okay?" She moved closer, studying his face. "You seem, I don't know, distant lately. Is it work? The promotion stress?" Jake ran a hand through his hair. A gesture she'd learned meant he was wrestling with something. "Just tired. Big project deadline Monday. Nothing that can't wait until after tomorrow." But Sarah had been with Jake for 6 years, married for 3. She knew his tells, the way he avoided eye contact when he was keeping something from her, how he'd find busy work with his hands when he was nervous. Right now, he was straightening chairs that were already perfectly aligned. "Jake." She placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Talk to me. What's going on?" For a moment she thought he might open up. His brown eyes met hers, and she saw something vulnerable there, maybe even desperate. But then he shook his head and kissed her forehead. "Nothing that can't wait, I promise. Let's focus on tomorrow, our friends, our family, celebrating our little girl." He placed his hand over hers on her belly. "That's what matters." Sarah wanted to push, but the baby chose that moment to deliver a particularly strong kick. Both of them laughed as Jake's eyes widened. "She's getting stronger," he said, and for the first time all day, his smile reached his eyes. "She knows her daddy's here," Sarah said. "Jake, I know we've been through a lot to get here, but I have such a good feeling about this baby. About us. About everything." Jake nodded, but she noticed he looked away quickly. "Me too. I should get these chairs set up. You've done enough for one day." As Jake carried the folding chairs toward the living room, Sarah remained in the kitchen, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the counter. Something was wrong. She'd felt it for weeks now, a tension in their house that went beyond normal pregnancy anxiety or work stress. Jake had been taking more phone calls in the garage, staying later at the office, and just last week she'd found him sitting in his truck in their driveway at 11 p.m., just sitting there in the dark. She'd asked him about it, of course. He'd said he was thinking about the baby, about being a good father, about providing for their family. All reasonable explanations. But Sarah had learned to trust her instincts, and right now, every instinct she had was screaming that something was very wrong. The October light was fading outside their kitchen window, casting long shadows across the yard where they'd planned to have Jake's friends smoke cigars after the shower. Sarah had bought special pink bubble solution for the kids to blow during photos. She'd even created a playlist that included songs she and Jake had danced to at their wedding, mixed with lullabies she'd been singing to her belly. Every detail had been planned with love, with hope, with the assumption that the man she'd married would be as excited as she was to celebrate their miracle baby with everyone they cared about. So why did she feel like she was planning a funeral instead of a baby shower? The sound of metal chairs scraping against hardwood floors echoed from the living room. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to shake off her anxiety. Tomorrow would be perfect. It had to be. After everything they'd been through, the losses, the fear, the months of hoping and waiting, they deserved one perfect day. She just couldn't shake the feeling that Jake was planning something entirely different. The baby kicked again, and Sarah pressed both hands to her belly. "It's okay, little one," she whispered. "Mommy's just being silly. Tomorrow's going to be the best day ever." But as she said the words, she realized she was trying to convince herself as much as her unborn daughter. The morning of the baby shower dawned crisp and clear, with that perfect Georgia October weather that made Sarah grateful they'd decided on an outdoor celebration. She'd been awake since 5 a.m., partly from excitement and partly from the baby's increasingly active movements. By 7 a.m., she'd already showered, styled her hair in loose waves, and slipped into the flowing mauve dress she'd ordered specifically for today, something that would photograph beautifully and accommodate her growing belly. Jake was in the kitchen when she came downstairs, already dressed in the navy button-down and khakis they'd agreed on. He was standing at the counter with a cup of coffee, staring out the window at their backyard, where white string lights twinkled in the oak trees. "You hung the lights," Sarah said, surprised. "When did you do that?" "Couldn't sleep. Figured I might as well make myself useful." His voice was flat, mechanical. "Coffee's fresh if you want some." Sarah poured herself a small cup. She'd been limiting her caffeine, but today felt like a day that called for a little extra energy. "Jake, you're scaring me. What's going on? And don't tell me it's work stress. I know you better than that." Jake set down his mug and turned to face her. For a moment, she thought he might finally tell her whatever he'd been hiding. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "Sarah, The doorbell rang. "That's probably Eleanor," Sarah said, but she didn't move toward the door. She said she'd be here early to help set up. "Jake, please, whatever it is, we can handle it together." "We always do." Jake nodded, but his eyes were distant again. "Yeah, of course. Let's get through today and then we'll talk. I promise." Sarah wanted to push, but Elena's voice was calling from the front door. "Sarah, my hands are full." The next 3 hours passed in a blur of activity. Elena had arrived with arms full of flowers, decorations, and enough food to feed an army. Jake's mother, Patricia, arrived shortly after with her efficient energy and a suitcase full of gifts. Sarah's best friend, Michelle, showed up with her 2-year-old daughter and a camera, ready to document every moment. "Oh my God, Sarah, this is like something from Pinterest," Michelle said, surveying the transformed living room. The pink and gold balloons created perfect arches. The cake looked professional on its decorated table, and the gift table was already groaning under the weight of presents. "It's gorgeous, Mija," Elena said, adjusting a flower arrangement. "You've outdone yourself." Sarah felt a surge of pride. Everything was perfect, exactly as she'd envisioned. The backyard was set up with round tables covered in pink linens, each centerpiece a small succulent in a gold pot that guests could take home. The food table showcased an array of finger foods, from her homemade chicken salad sandwiches to Elena's famous deviled eggs. But as she watched Jake helping his mother arrange gifts, she noticed his hands were shaking slightly. When Patricia asked him about work, his answers were vague, distracted. When Elena's husband Carlos arrived and clapped Jake on the back, congratulating him on becoming a father, Jake's smile was so forced it looked painful. "Jake, are you feeling okay?" Patricia asked, her maternal instincts clearly picking up on something. "You look pale." "Just nervous," Jake said. "Big day, you know." Sarah wanted to believe it was just nerves, but she'd seen Jake nervous before their wedding, before job interviews, before her previous pregnancy announcements. This was different. This was the look of a man carrying a secret so heavy it was crushing him. Guests began arriving at 1 p.m. sharp, the house filled with laughter, conversation, and the kind of warm chaos that comes with gathering people you love. Sarah found herself swept into the rhythm of hostess duties, greeting guests, accepting congratulations, posing for photos with her hand on her belly and Jake's arm around her waist. "You're glowing," her co-worker Janet said, hugging her carefully. "How are you feeling? When's the due date again?" "January 15th, Sarah said, the date rolling off her tongue easily. "I feel great, tired but great. We're so excited." And she was excited, standing in her living room, surrounded by friends and family who'd traveled from across Georgia and beyond to celebrate their baby. Sarah felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Her college roommate had driven down from Charlotte. Jake's soccer buddies had taken time off work to be here. Her grandmother had flown in from Miami, bringing the baby blanket she'd been crocheting for months. But every time she looked for Jake in the crowd, her heart clenched a little. He was going through the motions, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, laughing at jokes, but she could see the strain in his face. Several times, she caught him staring at his phone with an expression that looked almost like panic. "Jake seems quiet today," Michelle observed, appearing at Sarah's side with a plate of food. "Everything okay?" "Just overwhelmed, I think," Sarah said. But even as she spoke the words, she was watching Jake step outside to take a phone call. Through the window, she could see him pacing the driveway, one hand pressed to his forehead. "Sarah," Elena called from the kitchen, "time to bring out the cake." The cake ceremony was everything Sarah had dreamed of. Everyone gathered around as she and Jake stood behind the beautiful three-tier creation, their hands intertwined as they cut the first slice together. The room erupted in applause and camera flashes. Jake's smile was perfect for the photos, but Sarah noticed his grip on the knife was white-knuckled. "Speech!" someone called out. "Speech from the dad-to-be!" The room fell quiet, all eyes on Jake. Sarah squeezed his hand encouragingly, expecting him to deliver one of his trademark thoughtful, heartfelt speeches. He was good at this, at finding the right words for important moments. But Jake just stood there, staring at the assembled faces of their friends and family, looking like a deer caught in headlights. "Jake," Sarah whispered. He cleared his throat. "I thank you all for being here. For Sarah, for the baby. This means everything." It was brief, awkward, and completely unlike him. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and confusion. Several people looked concerned, but Elena quickly stepped in to direct everyone's attention to the gift opening. The next hour passed in a blur of wrapping paper and baby clothes. Sarah tried to focus on the joy of the moment, the tiny outfits, the thoughtful gifts, the love and support filling her living room, but she couldn't shake the growing dread in her stomach. When Jake's phone buzzed again and he stepped outside for another call, Sarah excused herself and followed him. She found him in the garage, his back to the door, his voice low and urgent. "No, I can't do this right now," he was saying. "Not today. I need more time to figure out how to—" "Yes, I understand what you're saying, but—" Sarah cleared her throat. Jake spun around, his face going white when he saw her. "I'll call you back," he said quickly, ending the call. "Jake." Sarah's voice was steady, but her heart was racing. "Who was that?" "Work. The Monday deadline, remember? On a Saturday? During our baby shower?" Sarah stepped closer, studying his face. "Jake, I need you to tell me the truth right now. What is going on?" Jake looked at her for a long moment. and Sarah saw something break in his expression. The careful mask he'd been wearing all day cracked, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. "Sarah, There you are!" Patricia's voice cut through the tension as she appeared in the garage doorway. "Everyone's looking for you two. Time for the group photo." Jake straightened, the mask sliding back into place. "Of course. Sorry, Mum. Coming right now." As they walked back toward the house, Sarah felt like she was sleepwalking. Something was terribly wrong, something that went beyond work stress or pregnancy nerves. The phone calls, the secrecy, the way Jake couldn't look her in the eye when he spoke about their future. Back in the living room, their friends and family gathered for photos. Sarah smiled and posed, one hand on her belly, the other in Jake's. To everyone else, they probably looked like the perfect expectant couple, glowing with happiness and surrounded by love. But Sarah felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff and the ground was starting to crumble beneath her feet. As the photographer called out instructions and camera flashes filled the room, Sarah caught Jake's eye in the crowd. For just a moment, his carefully constructed facade slipped, and she saw the truth written across his face. Whatever secret he was carrying was about to destroy everything they'd built together. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her distress. Sarah pressed her hand to the spot, whispering a silent prayer that she was wrong, that her instincts were betraying her, that the man she'd married would never do anything to hurt their family. But deep down, she knew. Something was coming, something that would change everything, and she was completely unprepared for what it would be. The afternoon sun was starting to slant through the windows of their living room, casting golden light across the remnants of what had been, by all accounts, a successful baby shower. Most of the guests had left, but a core group remained. Elena and Carlos, Jake's mother Patricia, Sarah's best friend Michelle, and a few close friends who'd stayed to help clean up. Sarah was in the kitchen, carefully packing leftover cake into containers, when she heard Jake's phone ring again. This time, instead of stepping outside, he answered it right there in the living room. "Hello?" His voice was tense, clipped. "No, I told you. Not today. I need more time to—" "What do you mean, now or never?" The conversation in the room quieted. Sarah set down the cake container and moved toward the living room, her heart beginning to race. "Jake, who's that?" Patricia asked, her maternal concern evident. Jake held up a finger, turning away from the group, but his voice was rising, and in the sudden quiet of the room, everyone could hear his side of the conversation. "I understand the situation, but this isn't— You can't just— Fine, I'll tell her, but not like this. Not with everyone here." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "Tell me what?" Jake ended the call and stood frozen for a moment, his back still to the room. When he finally turned around, his face was ashen, his eyes darting between Sarah and the concerned faces of their friends and family. "Jake?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Tell me what?" "Maybe we should talk privately," he said, but his voice cracked on the words. "No." Sarah's voice was stronger now, fueled by a mixture of fear and anger. "No more private conversations. No more secrets. Whatever it is, just say it." Elena stepped closer to Sarah, as if sensing she might need support. Patricia was watching her son with growing alarm. Michelle had her phone out, clearly debating whether to call someone. "Jake, you're scaring everyone," Carlos said gently. "What's going on, man?" Jake ran both hands through his hair, a gesture Sarah had never seen him make before. He looked like he was having a panic attack. Breathing shallow, eyes wide, hands trembling. "I never meant for it to happen," he said finally, his words tumbling out in a rush. It was supposed to be just once. A mistake. A stupid mistake. Sarah felt like she was falling, even though she was standing perfectly still. What was supposed to be just once? The affair. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. "I had an affair." The room erupted in gasps and shocked exclamations, but Sarah heard it all as if from underwater. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, and she pressed both hands to her belly instinctively. "When?" she whispered. "Last winter, February. It was just—" Sarah, I swear to you, it was just a few weeks. I ended it. I told her it was over, that I loved you, that we were trying to have a baby. Who? Sarah's voice was getting stronger, but Jake was still talking, the words pouring out like he couldn't stop them. She works at the same firm, but different department. I barely knew her. It was just, you were so sad after the second miscarriage, and I didn't know how to help you, and she was there, and I was weak, and it just happened. Who, Jake? Sarah's voice cut through his rambling like a knife. Melissa Chen. She's an architect at the firm. Sarah felt Elena's hand on her arm, steadying her. The room was spinning slightly, but she forced herself to focus. You said you ended it. Why was she calling you? Why today? Jake's face crumpled. Because she's pregnant. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She actually staggered backward, and Elena caught her elbow. She's what? Patricia's voice was sharp with disbelief. She's pregnant, Jake repeated, his voice breaking. She found out 2 weeks ago. She's been calling me, wanting to talk about what we're going to do. Sarah stared at her husband, the man she'd loved for 6 years, married for 3, the father of the baby currently growing inside her, and felt like she was looking at a complete stranger. How far along is she? Sarah asked, her voice eerily calm. I don't know exactly. She said about 3 months, maybe a little more. So she got pregnant in March, Elena said, her voice deadly quiet. While Sarah was pregnant too. The timeline hit everyone in the room at the same time. Sarah had gotten pregnant in late February, early March. Jake had been celebrating with Sarah, taking her to prenatal appointments, helping her pick out nursery colors, all while another woman was carrying his child too. Oh, Jake, Patricia whispered, and Sarah had never heard such disappointment in another person's voice. This wasn't supposed to happen, Jake said, and Sarah realized he was crying now. The affair was over. I love you, Sarah. I love our baby. This other thing, it was nothing. It meant nothing. Nothing. Sarah's voice was rising now, all the careful control she'd been maintaining starting to crack. You call another woman carrying your child nothing. That's not what I meant. What did you mean, Jake? Sarah was fully shouting now, and she didn't care. What exactly did you mean when you said this wasn't supposed to happen? Which part? The affair, the other pregnancy, or just getting caught? Jake was sobbing now, ugly tears streaming down his face. I meant all of it. I meant I was supposed to be better than this. I was supposed to be the husband you deserved, the father our daughter needs. I was supposed to be able to fix this before you ever had to know. Fix this? Sarah's voice was incredulous. How exactly were you planning to fix this, Jake? Were you going to convince her to have an abortion? Were you going to pay her to disappear? Were you going to support 2 babies without me ever finding out? I don't know, Jake exploded. I don't know, okay? I've been trying to figure it out for 2 weeks, and I don't know what to do. Sarah looked around the room at the faces of the people she loved most in the world. Eleanor's eyes were filled with tears of rage. Patricia looked like she might be sick. Michelle was openly crying. Carlos was staring at Jake like he'd never seen him before. And everywhere Sarah looked, she saw the remnants of their perfect baby shower. The pink and gold decorations, the opened gifts for their daughter, the beautiful cake she'd spent hours making, the photos they'd taken just an hour ago where they'd looked like the perfect happy family. I baked the cake, Sarah said quietly, and everyone in the room went silent. I baked the cake. I decorated the room. I planned every detail of today because I thought we were celebrating our miracle baby, our second chance at happiness after everything we'd been through. She walked over to the gift table where onesies and tiny shoes and baby blankets were still scattered from the unwrapping. She picked up a little pink dress with the tag still on it. I've been singing to her, Sarah continued, her voice getting stronger. Every night I put my hands on my belly and I sing to our daughter. I tell her about her daddy, about how excited he is to meet her, about how much he loves her already. Jake was still crying, but he'd gone quiet. I tell her about the nursery we're going to paint together, about the stories you're going to read to her, about how safe and loved she's going to feel with both of her parents. Sarah looked directly at Jake. And the whole time, you were planning how to handle your other child, the one that wasn't supposed to happen. Sarah, please. No. Sarah's voice was firm now, decisive. No, I'm done. I'm done with your explanations and your excuses and your promises to figure it out later. I'm done with secrets and lies and pretending everything is fine when it's not. She walked over to Jake, close enough that she could see the panic in his eyes. You want to know what wasn't supposed to happen? She said quietly. I wasn't supposed to find out that my husband is a liar and a cheater at our baby shower, surrounded by everyone we love. I wasn't supposed to discover that while I was grieving our miscarriages and praying for this baby, you were creating another baby with someone else. Sarah stepped back, one hand on her belly. But you know what, Jake? It did happen. All of it. And now we have to figure out what we're going to do about it. The room was completely silent, except for the sound of Jake's quiet crying and the tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. The clock they'd bought together for their first anniversary, back when Sarah thought they'd be timing their whole lives together. What are you saying? Jake whispered. Sarah looked around the room one more time, at the decorations, the gifts, the cake, the evidence of all her hopes and dreams for their future. Then she looked at Jake, the man she'd thought she'd spend the rest of her life with. I'm saying that you need to leave, she said simply. Right now, and you need to figure out what you're going to do about your other child, because I can't do this anymore. Sarah, no, please. We can work this out. We can get counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. Jake. Patricia's voice was quiet but firm. You heard her. You need to go. Sarah had never been more grateful for her mother-in-law's presence. Even Jake's own mother could see that this was beyond repair, at least for now. Jake looked around the room, at the faces of people who'd been celebrating with them just an hour ago. Now they were all looking at him with varying degrees of disappointment, anger, and pity. I love you, he said to Sarah, his voice breaking. I love you and our baby more than anything in the world. Sarah placed both hands on her belly, feeling their daughter moving inside her. I know you do, she said quietly, but love isn't enough anymore, Jake. Not after this. Jake nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I'll get some things and go to my brother's. We'll talk when you're ready. No, Sarah said. We'll talk when I decide what I want to say, and when you figure out what you're going to do about the other woman carrying your child. As Jake walked toward the stairs to pack a bag, Sarah sank into her favorite chair, the one where she'd been planning to nurse their daughter, where she'd imagined reading bedtime stories and singing lullabies. Instead, she was sitting in the wreckage of her marriage, surrounded by baby shower decorations and the shocked faces of her loved ones, trying to figure out how to rebuild her life from scratch. The baby kicked, and Sarah pressed her hand to the spot. It's okay, little one, she whispered. Mommy's going to figure this out. We're going to be okay. But as she said the words, Sarah wasn't sure if she was trying to comfort her daughter or herself. 3 weeks had passed since the baby shower, and Sarah's house felt like a museum of broken dreams. The nursery remained half-finished, paint cans sitting unopened in the corner where Jake had left them. The baby gifts were still scattered across the dining room table, most of them unwrapped, since the shower had ended so abruptly. Sarah couldn't bring herself to put them away, but she also couldn't bear to look at them. She was sitting in her kitchen on a grey November morning, holding a cup of herbal tea and staring at the stack of legal documents Elena had insisted she get from a family attorney: divorce papers, custody agreements, financial disclosures. Words that felt foreign and impossible when applied to her life. The baby was more active now, at 31 weeks, her movements strong enough to be visible through Sarah's sweater. Sarah had started talking to her more frequently, partly because she'd read it was good for development, and partly because she felt desperately lonely in the house that had once felt like home. Your daddy called again yesterday, she said quietly, her hand tracing circles on her belly. He wants to come over and talk. I'm not ready yet, but I think we're going to have to soon. There are things we need to figure out." The doorbell rang, interrupting her one-sided conversation. Through the peephole, Sarah saw Michelle standing on the porch with a bag of groceries and a determined expression. "I brought real food," Michelle announced as Sarah opened the door. "Not the crackers and ice cream you've been living on." "I'm eating fine," Sarah protested, but she was grateful for the company. The past 3 weeks had been a blur of well-meaning visitors, but Michelle was the only one who didn't treat Sarah like she was made of glass. "You're eating like someone who's depressed and 7 months pregnant," Michelle said, unpacking groceries with her usual efficiency. "Which is understandable but not sustainable. How's the baby?" "Active, healthy, according to Dr. Rodriguez, completely unaffected by my emotional state, which is apparently a miracle." Michelle paused in her unpacking. "Have you heard from Jake lately?" Sarah nodded. "He calls every day, texts too. He wants to talk about the future, about co-parenting, about the other situation." The other situation had become Sarah's shorthand for Jake's affair and Melissa's pregnancy. She still couldn't say the words out loud without feeling like she might be sick. "What kind of other situation?" Michelle asked gently. Sarah sighed. "Melissa's due in late May. She wants Jake to be involved, obviously. She's been calling him, wanting to make plans, talk about logistics. He's been trying to handle both situations, but it's complicated." "I imagine it is," Michelle said dryly. 2 babies, 2 different women, 1 incredibly stupid man. Despite everything, Sarah found herself smiling. That's one way to put it. "Have you decided what you want to do?" Sarah looked down at her belly, where their daughter was currently doing what felt like somersaults. "I know I want to raise her. I know I want to be her mother and give her the best life possible. Beyond that," she shrugged, "I'm taking it one day at a time." Michelle sat down across from her at the kitchen table. "And Jake, have you decided what you want to do about Jake?" It was the question everyone was asking, but no one quite knew how to phrase. Sarah's parents had flown in from California the week after the shower, staying for 5 days and offering to have Sarah come stay with them until the baby was born. Eleanor called every morning with updates on her research into family law attorneys. Patricia had been by twice, tearfully apologizing for her son's behavior and offering to help in any way she could. Everyone wanted to know what Sarah was going to do about her marriage. "I don't know," Sarah said honestly. "I love him. I hate him. I want to forgive him. I want to never see him again. I want our daughter to have her father. I want to protect her from the chaos he's created." "Those are all completely reasonable feelings," Michelle said. "Are they? Because I feel like I'm going crazy. One minute I'm planning our divorce, and the next minute I'm wondering if we can somehow work through this. Then I remember that there's another woman carrying his child, and I feel like I'm going to throw up." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and sighed. "Jake?" Michelle asked. "Yeah, he wants to come over tonight. Says he needs to talk to me about something important. Are you going to let him?" Sarah stared at the message for a long moment. She'd been avoiding face-to-face conversations with Jake since the day he'd left, communicating only through texts and brief phone calls. But she was 7 months pregnant, and there were practical decisions that needed to be made. "I think I have to," she said finally. "We need to talk about the birth plan, about what happens when the baby comes, about logistics, about—" She took a shaky breath. "About what kind of relationship we're going to have going forward." Michelle reached across the table and squeezed Sarah's hand. "Whatever you decide, you know I'm here for you, right? Eleanor, your parents, Patricia, we're all here. You don't have to figure this out alone." Sarah nodded, feeling tears prick her eyes. "I know. I never thought I'd be here, you know, planning to raise a baby essentially as a single mother, trying to figure out custody arrangements before she's even born." "You're not a single mother," Michelle said firmly. "Jake may have screwed up royally, but he's still going to be this baby's father, and you have an entire support system of people who love you and want to help." After Michelle left, Sarah spent the afternoon trying to prepare for Jake's visit. She showered, put on a maternity dress that made her feel more put together, and even attempted to tidy up the living room. But every time she walked past the dining room table with its scattered baby gifts, she felt her resolve wavering. Jake arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, looking thinner than she remembered and carrying a folder of papers. He'd been staying with his brother Marcus across town, and Sarah could see the strain of the past few weeks in his face. "Hi," he said softly when she opened the door. "Hi." They stood there for a moment, looking at each other. Sarah noticed he was wearing the navy shirt she'd bought him for his birthday, and she had to look away. "Come in," she said. Jake followed her to the living room, where they sat on opposite ends of the couch, the same couch where they'd cuddled and watched movies throughout her pregnancy, where they'd made lists of baby names and planned their future. "How are you feeling?" Jake asked. "How's the baby?" "We're fine, healthy. Dr. Rodriguez says everything looks good." Jake nodded, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I've been thinking about her every day, about you, about what I've done to our family." Sarah felt the familiar twist in her stomach at his words. "What did you want to talk about, Jake?" "You said it was important." Jake opened the folder he'd brought and pulled out several documents. "I've been meeting with lawyers, and with Melissa. We've worked out an arrangement." Sarah's heart began to race. "What kind of arrangement?" "She's going to have the baby," Jake said quietly. "Obviously. And I'm going to provide financial support. But Sarah, I want you to know, I told her that my priority is you and our daughter, that whatever relationship I have with that child, it won't interfere with our family." Sarah stared at him. "Our family? Jake, we don't have a family anymore. You destroyed our family when you decided to sleep with someone else. We can rebuild it," Jake said desperately. "Sarah, I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you in the worst possible way, but we love each other. We're having a baby together. We can get through this." "How?" Sarah's voice was getting louder. "How exactly do we get through this, Jake? You're going to have 2 children, 4 months apart, 2 children with 2 different women. How do we build a family around that?" Jake was quiet for a moment. I thought maybe we could find a way to make it work. Blended families exist. People navigate complicated situations all the time." Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Blended families. Jake, those are families that come together after divorce or death. This is you cheating on your pregnant wife and creating another pregnant woman. This isn't a blended family. This is a mess." "I know it's a mess," Jake said, his voice breaking, "but it's our mess, and I want to fix it." Sarah stood up, pacing to the window. Outside, their neighbor was raking leaves in his yard, a normal Saturday evening activity that felt like it belonged to a different universe. "You can't fix this, Jake," she said without turning around. "You can't undo what you did. You can't make Melissa and her baby disappear. You can't take back the lies or the betrayal or the fact that you looked me in the eye every day for months while carrying this secret. So what are you saying?" Jake's voice was small. "Are you saying it's over? That you want a divorce?" Sarah turned to face him, one hand on her belly, where their daughter was moving restlessly, as if sensing the tension in the room. "I'm saying that I don't know how to trust you anymore," she said. "I'm saying that every time I look at you, I think about her. About the fact that while I was crying over our miscarriages and praying for this baby, you were with someone else, creating another baby." Jake was crying now, quiet tears streaming down his face. "I hate myself for what I did. I hate that I hurt you. I hate that I've messed up our daughter's life before she's even born." "Then why did you do it?" Sarah asked, the question she'd been carrying for 3 weeks finally spilling out. "Why, Jake, we were trying to have a baby. We were planning our future. Why did you risk everything for someone who meant nothing to you?" Jake was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Because I was scared," he said. "After the second miscarriage, you were so sad, and I didn't know how to help you. I felt like I was failing as a husband. And at work, Melissa was easy to talk to. She didn't need anything from me except conversation. There was no pressure, no sadness, no fear of disappointment." Sarah felt like she'd been slapped. "So you're saying this is my fault? because I was grieving our lost babies. No, Jake said quickly. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying I was weak and selfish, and I made the worst decision of my life because I couldn't handle the pressure of being what you needed. Sarah sat back down, feeling suddenly exhausted. And now? Can you handle the pressure now? Because raising a baby is going to be infinitely more stressful than trying to conceive one. I want the chance to try, Jake said. I want to be the husband and father I should have been from the beginning, while also being a father to another child, Sarah pointed out, with another woman who you're going to have to coordinate with for the next 18 years. Jake nodded miserably. I know it's complicated. I know it's not what we planned. But Sarah, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this work. Counseling, therapy, whatever you need. Sarah looked at the man she'd married, the man she'd thought she'd spend the rest of her life with. She could see that he was sincere, that he was desperate to fix what he'd broken, but she could also see the impossibility of their situation stretching out before them like a maze with no exit. I need time, she said finally. I need time to figure out what I want. What's best for our daughter? What I can live with, Jake nodded. How much time? I don't know. Maybe until after she's born. Maybe longer. But Jake, I need you to understand something. Even if we do try to work this out, things will never be the same. Our marriage, our family, our future, it's all different now. I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again. I understand, Jake said quietly, and I'm willing to accept that if it means we can try. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of their conversation settling between them. Finally, Sarah spoke. I want you to be present for the birth, she said. Whatever happens between us, you're her father, and you should be there when she's born. Jake's face lit up with the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in weeks. Really? Really? But after that, we'll have to figure out logistics. Where you'll live, how custody will work, how we'll handle holidays and birthdays and all the million decisions that come with raising a child. What about her name? Jake asked. We never finished deciding. Sarah had been thinking about this a lot lately. They'd narrowed it down to 3 names before everything fell apart, but Sarah had been reconsidering all of them. Hope, she said suddenly. I want to name her Hope. Jake looked surprised. That wasn't on our list. I know, but that's what she is for me now. She's hope that I can rebuild my life, hope that I can be a good mother, hope that something beautiful can come out of all this mess. Jake nodded, fresh tears in his eyes. Hope Martinez. I like it. Hope Sarah Martinez, Sarah corrected. She gets my middle name. They talked for another hour about practical matters, doctor's appointments, birth plans, what Jake would be allowed to bring to the hospital. It felt strange and formal, like they were business partners negotiating a contract rather than husband and wife preparing for their first child. When Jake finally left, Sarah sat alone in her living room, one hand on her belly, trying to process everything they'd discussed. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard where they'd planned to teach their daughter to ride a bike, to play catch, to have backyard barbecues with friends and family. All those dreams felt fragile now, uncertain, but as hope kicked against her ribs, Sarah felt a flicker of the emotion her daughter was named for. Maybe they couldn't rebuild what they'd had. Maybe their family would look different than what they'd originally planned. But Sarah was going to be a mother, and that was something Jake's mistakes couldn't take away from her. It's going to be okay, little Hope, she whispered. I don't know what our life is going to look like, but I promise you this, you're going to be loved, so loved, and somehow we're going to figure out how to make this work. As if in response, Hope delivered a strong kick, and for the first time in 3 weeks, Sarah found herself genuinely smiling. Outside, the last light of day was fading, but inside Sarah's house, something new was beginning to take root. Not the family she'd planned, not the future she'd envisioned, but something else, something that might eventually be enough. The baby shower decorations were still scattered around the house, a reminder of the day everything changed. But tomorrow, Sarah decided she would start putting them away, not because she was giving up, but because she was ready to start building something new, something real, something honest, something worthy of the little girl who would be here in just a few weeks, carrying her mother's hope for the future in her very name. The contractions started at 3:17 a.m. on a cold January morning, exactly 2 weeks before Hope's due date. Sarah woke to a sharp pain that felt different from the Braxton Hicks contractions she'd been experiencing for weeks. This was deeper, more insistent, and accompanied by a rush of adrenaline that told her this was finally it. She lay in bed for a few minutes, timing the contractions with the app on her phone, 7 minutes apart, lasting about 45 seconds each. Not quite time to go to the hospital yet, but definitely the real thing. Sarah reached for her phone to call Jake. They hadn't spoken much since their conversation in November, just brief texts about doctor's appointments and logistics. But they'd agreed he would be there for the birth, and despite everything that had happened between them, Sarah found herself wanting him there now. "Sarah?" Jake's voice was groggy but immediately alert when he answered. "Is everything okay?" "It's time," she said simply. "The contractions started about 20 minutes ago. They're still pretty far apart, but Dr. Rodriguez said to call you when they started." "I'm on my way," Jake said, and Sarah could hear him moving around, probably getting dressed. "Are you okay? Do you need me to call anyone else?" "I already texted Elena. She's going to meet us at the hospital." Sarah breathed through another contraction. "Jake, can you hurry? I know it's probably going to be hours, but I don't want to be alone right now. I'm leaving right now. I'll be there in 15 minutes. While she waited for Jake, Sarah took a shower and finished packing her hospital bag. She'd had it mostly ready for weeks, but there were still a few last-minute items to add. As she moved around the house, she found herself talking to Hope. "Okay, baby girl, this is it," she said, folding a going-home outfit into the bag. "We're finally going to meet you. Mommy's a little scared, but mostly excited. Are you ready?" Hope responded with what felt like a somersault, making Sarah laugh despite the growing intensity of her contractions. Jake arrived just as Sarah was having a particularly strong contraction. She was leaning against the kitchen counter, breathing deeply, when she heard his key in the door. For a moment, the familiarity of the sound, Jake coming home, made her heart clench with longing for how things used to be. "Sarah?" He appeared in the kitchen doorway, still wearing yesterday's clothes and looking like he'd barely slept. "How are you doing?" "Better now that you're here," she admitted, surprising herself with the honesty. Jake looked surprised too, but relieved. "What can I do? What do you need? Can you grab my hospital bag? It's upstairs on the bed, and maybe call Dr. Rodriguez's office to let them know we're coming in." As Jake hurried upstairs, Sarah had another contraction, this one strong enough to make her gasp. When Jake returned with her bag, he found her bent over the kitchen island, breathing hard. "That was less than 5 minutes from the last one," he said, checking the time on his phone. "I think we should go." The drive to Northside Hospital felt surreal. Jake drove carefully through the empty pre-dawn streets, while Sarah focused on breathing through contractions that were coming faster and stronger. It felt strange to be in the car together again. They hadn't been alone like this since the night he'd moved out. "Are you nervous?" Sarah asked during a brief break between contractions. Jake glanced at her, his hands tight on the steering wheel. "Terrified," he admitted. "But also, I can't wait to meet her. To meet Hope." Sarah nodded. Despite everything that had happened between them, this moment felt sacred somehow. They were about to become parents together, and that was bigger than their marriage problems, bigger than the affair, bigger than all the hurt and anger. "Jake," she said, as they pulled into the hospital parking lot, "whatever happens between us, I want you to know that I'm glad you're here for this. Hope deserves to have both her parents there when she's born." Jake's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for letting me be here, for everything." The next several hours passed in a blur of hospital rooms, monitors, nurses, and steadily intensifying contractions. Elena arrived around 6 a.m. with coffee and encouragement. Jake stayed by Sarah's side, holding her hand during contractions and helping her breathe through the pain. "You're doing amazing," he kept saying. "You're so strong, Sarah." Hope is lucky to have you as her mom." By noon, Sarah was exhausted but determined. The contractions were coming one right after another, and Dr. Rodriguez said it was almost time to push. Jake was still holding her hand, his other hand gently stroking her hair. "I can see her head," Dr. Rodriguez announced. "Sarah, on the next contraction, I need you to give me a big push." Sarah bore down with everything she had, Jake's hand gripping hers tightly. She could hear him whispering encouragement, telling her how proud he was, how brave she was being. "Here comes another one," the nurse said. "This might be it." Sarah pushed again, feeling like she was splitting in half, and suddenly there was a rush of relief and the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard, Hope's first cry. "She's here," Dr. Rodriguez said, lifting a tiny, perfect baby into view. "It's a girl, and she's absolutely beautiful." Sarah was sobbing with relief and joy, reaching for her daughter. When Dr. Rodriguez placed Hope on her chest, Sarah felt like her heart might explode with love. "Hi, baby girl," she whispered, touching Hope's tiny face. "Hi, sweet Hope, Mommy's here." Hope was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a head full of dark hair, and the most beautiful eyes Sarah had ever seen. She was crying lustily, her little fists waving in the air. "She's so beautiful," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. "Sarah, she's perfect. You did such an amazing job." For a moment, looking at their daughter together, Sarah felt like they were a family again. Jake was crying as he looked at Hope, his face full of wonder and love. Can I hold her?" he asked tentatively. Sarah nodded, carefully transferring Hope to Jake's arms. Watching her husband hold their daughter for the first time, Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions: love, sadness, hope, and a deep ache for what they'd lost. "Hi, Hope," Jake whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm your daddy. I love you so much already. I'm going to try to be the best father I can be, I promise." Hope seemed to calm down in Jake's arms, her cries settling into soft whimpers. She opened her eyes and seemed to look right at him, and Jake let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "She's looking at me," he said in wonder. "Sarah, she's looking right at me. She knows her daddy's voice," Sarah said softly. "I played recordings of you reading to her when I was pregnant, remember? You recorded those children's books for her." Jake looked at Sarah with surprise and gratitude. "You did that? Even after everything?" "She deserves to know her father," Sarah said simply. "No matter what happens between us, she deserves that." The next few hours were a whirlwind of visitors, congratulations, and getting used to having hope in the world. Elena cried when she held her niece. Patricia flew in from Phoenix and spent an hour just staring at her granddaughter in amazement. Michelle brought flowers and took approximately 1,000 photos. But it was the quiet moments that meant the most to Sarah. Watching Jake change Hope's first diaper with shaking hands, seeing him figure out how to swaddle her, listening to him sing softly when she fussed. "You're a natural," Sarah told him during one of these moments. They were alone in the hospital room, Hope sleeping peacefully in the bassinet between them. "I don't feel like it," Jake admitted. "I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing." "None of us do," Sarah said. "That's the secret of parenting. Everyone's just figuring it out as they go." Jake was quiet for a moment, watching Hope sleep. "Sarah, I know this isn't the time or place, but I need you to know something. Being here today, seeing you bring our daughter into the world, holding her for the first time, it's made me realize how much I've messed up, how much I've lost." Sarah felt her chest tighten. "Jake, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I'm not asking you to forgive me or take me back or pretend like everything's fine. I just need you to know that I understand now what I threw away, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of being Hope's father, even if I can never be worthy of being your husband again." Sarah looked at their daughter, so small and perfect and innocent of all the complications surrounding her birth. "What about Melissa's baby?" she asked quietly. "When is she due?" Jake's face darkened. "May 15th, a boy. She wants to name him Connor. Are you going to be there for his birth?" Jake was quiet for a long time. "I don't know," he said finally. "Melissa wants me to be, but Sarah, I can't be the father to him that I want to be to Hope. I can't give him the same attention, the same presence. It's not fair to him, but I can't pretend otherwise. Sarah understood what he was saying, even if she didn't know how to respond to it. Jake's affair had created an impossible situation. 2 children born months apart, with completely different places in his heart and life. You're going to have to figure that out, she said finally. For both children's sake, they didn't ask for this situation, but they both deserve to have a father who shows up for them. Jake nodded. I know, I don't know how to be in 2 places at once, how to split my heart between 2 families. Oh, that's something you should have thought about before you had the affair, Sarah said, but without the anger that would have been there 6 months ago. She was too exhausted, too full of love for Hope to summon much rage. Hope stirred in her bassinet, making soft baby noises. Both Sarah and Jake immediately leaned forward, ready to respond to their daughter's needs. She's so perfect, Sarah whispered, touching Hope's tiny hand. Jake, whatever happens between us, promise me we'll put her first. Promise me we won't let our problems hurt her. I promise, Jake said solemnly. Sarah, I may have failed as a husband, but I'm not going to fail as her father. I'm going to be there for every doctor's appointment, every milestone, every moment you'll let me. Sarah looked at him, this man who had broken her heart, but had also just helped her bring their daughter into the world. She couldn't forgive him yet, might never fully forgive him, but she could see that he was sincere about wanting to be a good father to Hope. We'll figure it out, she said finally, one day at a time, for her. As if she'd been listening to their conversation, Hope opened her eyes and looked directly at both of them, her little face serious and alert. Hi, baby girl, Sarah said softly. Welcome to the world. It's complicated and messy, and sometimes people make really bad decisions, but it's also full of love. So much love. Jake reached over and gently touched Hope's cheek. And no matter what else happens, you're going to be loved by both of your parents. That's a promise. Hope seemed to consider this, then yawned and closed her eyes again, apparently satisfied with the arrangement. Sarah lay back against her pillows, exhaustion finally catching up with her. In a few hours, they'd go home to the house that was no longer a family home, but wasn't quite a single mother's house either. They'd figure out custody schedules and holidays, and how to co-parent across 2 households. Jake would eventually have to navigate the birth of his other child and all the complications that would bring. But right now, in this hospital room, they were just 2 people who had created something beautiful together. Whatever else happened, they would always have this moment. The day Hope was born, the day they became parents, the day their daughter taught them that love could be bigger than the mistakes that had brought them here. As Sarah drifted off to sleep, she could hear Jake humming softly to Hope, the same lullaby Sarah had been singing to her belly for months. And for the first time since the baby shower, Sarah felt something that might, eventually, become peace.